Hello, my name is Jesse Knight. This is the history of the Pentecostal movement with Spirit-Empowered Living with Oral Roberts University. The history of the Pentecostal movement started in the early 1900s. It started on a college campus of all places, a school. It started there. And then it spread. It went to California, to the City of Angels, Los Angeles. Not the one in heaven. At least, yeah, anyway, right? But it may be someday. But it went to Los Angeles. And it started in a prayer meeting and somehow made it to a guy's porch. Yeah, preaching from his porch. His name was William Seymour. They found their way to an abandoned church, right, and started preaching there. Revival took place, right? So they preached 7 days a week, 3 services a day for 3.5 years. It's supposed to be one of the longest lasting revivals ever. The thing would grow from this one location to one of the largest denominations in the world. It's touched hundreds of millions of lives by emphasizing largely justification by faith, right? So that's salvation, the belief in faith in Jesus for salvation, and the baptism of the Holy Spirit. It also emphasized things like divine healing. It emphasized things like the second coming of Christ, and then the one other one that was called the entire sanctification, which was a separate blessing. It's the Wesleyan stuff. And so it spread. And by the 50s and 60s, it turned into the charismatic movement. Charismatic hit the televisions and radios, and it did so from Azusa, right? Starts in Azusa in California. This guy comes over from North Carolina, goes to California, goes back to North Carolina, and goes there, right? Oral Roberts is supposed to be baptized in this church somewhere in North Carolina, so he's tied to the Azusa Street revival, which is important, and so it spreads. It turns into the charismatic movement. Right? So the charismatic movement hits in the 50s and the 60s. Right? Goes to mainline churches. Goes mainline. So it goes throughout denominations. Hits the Anglican Church, which was the largest Protestant denomination, makes it into the Catholic Church, hits all the other denominations. And a lot of churches come out of this Pentecostal movement. A lot of the churches that we grew up in, right? So I went from Assemblies of God Church. I come from that, so I know this personally. And it spreads. It spreads. So it emphasizes a lot of cool things that people really relate to. Transcends racial boundaries, right? It's past all the segregation and racism of yesteryear. Does that. Does that through the blood of Christ. Through the power of God. It's not just a political movement or something like that. This is spiritual. So very important. It acknowledges the role of the prophetess. Right? The female preacher. That's cool. Especially coming from a family where a lot of women in my family have master's degrees. Some of them have more than one master's degree. Some of them don't have any college. Still, they're important. They can still preach. They can pray too. And so that's good. That's good. That's good, especially when you have younger ones. I have some I know that are about this tall that are growing up. So that's good. And so because that's important to know that they have a voice, that they're heard, that they are acknowledged for what they accomplished through their own prayer lives. So that's really really good because I know how much it affected me. The younger ones these days, the ones I know, do go to the non-denominational churches, so that's also important. And so I don't know that everyone would identify as Pentecostal. I know plenty of people that identify with other traditions, and that's fine with me. I don't mind that. I don't mind if people identify with other traditions. I've been blessed by other traditions, so I've actually gone to a few of these other traditions, a few of these other churches. I was blessed by God there. I know the presence of God is there. I know the Holy Spirit is there because I've been there. I can feel it. One of the few legitimate healings that I've ever come across was in a Catholic church. That's true. That was there. It's interesting that the Pentecostal guy in me was there when the healing happened. Maybe yes, maybe. Either way, I saw one. Very cool. The I'm a prophecy guy. I'm a prophecy guy. So that's really what draws me into it a lot. The Holy Spirit has dealt with me over the course of my life, largely in prophecy. I'm fascinated by prophecy. When I was a little kid, probably 13 or so. I was a little kid, but young. One of my wishes was to just be able to see a vision, a vision, kind of like the people in the Bible did, sort of like John the Revelator or something. That was one of my deepest wishes. And so hopefully someday I'll have a book or something of my own, Holy Spirit Research Center. Maybe, maybe, that would be fun. It would happen. I've already been basically assured of that. But, it's just a story for another day. But from a higher source. But it was a really cool thing. So the movement hits the mainline churches and spreads through mainline churches. That's the charismatic movement, right? So it goes on television. It gets to where we are today, where it's kind of known as the Pentecostal charismatic movement, and it's impacted the lives of hundreds of millions of people across multiple denominations, multiple languages, and the world. Wow, wow, that's hard to imagine, but it has done that, and it's it affected me in my everyday life. It affected me in my worldviews. It affected me in my faith in the future, right? And how I face challenges, right? And deal with those things because some of the most important things that we do as people is live. And so you have your family, you may be married, you got a wife, you got kids, you got to raise, you got family, friends, you got to take care of your communities. It's all important. So that's one of the main things. One thing I definitely would emphasize for every believer is the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I definitely think that's the baptism Jesus brought. Jesus brought that baptism. He brought the baptism of the Holy Spirit. That I emphasize for every believer of every denomination, because that goes back to Jesus. And that's in the Book of Acts. And that was fascinating to see that the Book of Acts, throughout the stages, the Pentecostal revival, Azusa Street revival, early 1900s, through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the charismatic movement, the Book of Acts was just quoted and cited so many times, and so many of these revivals came from the Book of Acts. So I would definitely recommend that, to anyone. I was always a Galatians kind of guy and a Revelation kind of guy. Acts, yeah, I definitely see it now. Definitely see it now. So that's really really good, and that's what I think that every believer should know. Every believer should know that and should follow that. And that's the story. That's the story of how it spread, how it became a part of our world today, and how it has influenced our world today, and will continue to do so into the future. It came through faith, through prayer, through belief, and it was a emphasize of the baptism from the Book of Acts that Jesus Himself brought to the world. It emphasizes the gifts of the Holy Spirit being in operation today. It moves the church away from cessationism and back into the idea of the Holy Spirit being involved in people's lives today, including ministry through the gifts. Very important. And that's one thing I think that would be emphasized, because that's what Jesus brought to us. So that's one thing I would point out. That's what makes it happen. It's in the power of the Bible. It's in the power of the blood. It's in the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Presence of God. And that's the history of the Pentecostal Charismatic Movement. My name is Jesse Knight. This is Spirit Empowered Living for Oral Roberts University. Thanks for listening. Bye.